Hi everyone, it's Karolyn here, and I'm really excited to share another My Favorite Things release class project with you. I'm using the new You and Me Forever stamp set to demonstrate the selective dimension technique. This technique is also sometimes referred to as paper toll, T-O-L-E. It's where you choose an area of your design and layer it in sections to give added dimension. You'll see what I mean as we get more into detail in the video. In addition to the You and Me Forever stamp set, I'm also using the Spring Scene Builder Die-namics, the Stitched Valley Die-namics, the Inside and Out Square Die-namics, the A2 Stitched Rectangle STAX 1 Die-namics, the Slanted Sentiment Strips Die-namics, and the Stitched Sentiment Strip Die-namics. I added some pattern paper from the Gray and White Basics 6x6 paper pack, and I'm using some smooth white sour apple, poppy, and Kraft cardstock to complete my design. So let's get started. I've stamped the sheep that looks like she's jumping 6 times onto some Copic-friendly cardstock using black licorice hybrid ink. I've colored one of the images off camera and thought I'd share my coloring process so you can see what I did. I started with W0 to lay down my base color, and then I add shading with W1 and W2. For her face, ears, and legs, I use W3, W5, and W7. I add some texture to the used body with W3, add some color to the inside of her ears using R02, and color her bow with R14, R17, and R27. For the paper toll technique, I colored 2 full-sized images, 2 images with only her head, and 2 of the bows. I try to color each image exactly the same because it's important in the paper toll technique to have uniformity in your coloring. Now that all my coloring is complete, I'm using my detail scissors to cut out each of the colored portions of the images. I try to stay as close to the lines of the image as possible, being careful not to leave a white border. It's a bit more tedious than using the coordinating dies to cut out the images, but it's an important step in the paper toll technique. Once I've cut out all of the images, I use a black marker to carefully color the outside edge. I feel that this finishes off the images and doesn't distract the eye from the dimension you're trying to create. You'll see what I mean when we start to assemble the focal image. I've trimmed a 4 1/4 inch by 11 inch piece of smooth white cardstock for my card base, and I'm scoring at 5 1/2 inches. I'm using my Teflon bone folder to perfect the crease. Now I'm masking off the edges of the card base with some 1 inch post-it tape because I want to do some ink blending for my scene. I'm doing it directly onto the card base to help minimize the bulk of the card. Off camera, I trimmed a 4 1/4 inch by 5 1/2 inch panel from smooth white cardstock, and I die cut it using the largest of the dies in the A2 Stitched Rectangle STAX Set 1 Die-namics, and the second to the largest of the Inside and Out Square Die-namics to create an aperture for my scene. I also die cut 2 hillsides from sour apple cardstock using the Stitched Valley Die-namics. I temporarily placed that image panel and hills onto the card base to help me figure out where to mask off the bottom portion of my aperture. And then I start my ink blending. You'll notice that I added a second piece of masking tape to make sure I don't mess up my card base. I lightly blend some mustard seed distress ink, starting my ink blending tool on the masking tape to help prevent any harsh lines or blotches. Then I add a light blend of picked raspberry, and finish it off with another light blend of mustard seed. I flip the card base around, and now I'll start blending my sky. I'm basically repeating the same steps from before. I start with a light blend of tumbled glass, then add some Mermaid Lagoon for added dimension and vibrancy, and blend the two together with another light application of tumbled glass. I carefully remove the masking tape to reveal my happy background. Now I'm adhering the hillsides to the image panel. I want the right hillside to look like it's in the foreground, so I'm attaching it to the back of the image panel with some Scotch tape. I want the left hillside to look like it's off in the distance, so I'm adhering it to the back of the image panel using some foam squares. It takes a bit of planning, but building a scene is therapeutic for me. It's so fun to see it all come together for a little piece of imaginary reality. I've added some foam squares to the back of the image panel, and I'm aligning and adhering it to the card base. I'll use some thin 3D foam squares to assemble my sheep image. These will help cut down on the bulk of the image, but still allow for some fun dimension. MFT carries the thin foam squares in their online boutique. I start by adhering the 2 full-sized images together and build the dimension by adding the 2 head images on top and then the 2 bow images. The 3D effect of paper toll is such a fun technique to help bring some life to an otherwise flat image. You could use regular foam squares for this technique, but keep in mind that the bulk will potentially force you to pay more postage. I prefer the thin foam squares for this technique myself, but it's totally up to you. I die cut the rest of the scene for my card off camera using the Spring Scene Builder Dynamics. I die cut the fence and 2 tree trunks from Kraft cardstock, 2 trees from Sour Apple cardstock, and 2 clouds from Smooth White cardstock. I use my glue pen and some foam tape to adhere the fence in place, and then I can adhere my assembled sheep. I want her to look like she's jumping over the fence. My glue pen and tweezers come in handy to assemble and adhere the trees and clouds to the card base. I don't know what I'd do without my tweezers. I apply some permanent tape runner to the top of the left tree since I want it to look like it's in the background. And I add a foam square to the larger tree top so that it looks like it's in the foreground. Once you get the hang of this scene building business, it'll all become second nature to you. I've added a foam square to the clouds, and I'm adding them to my cute little scene. Now it's time to create our sentiment. I thought the "You Go Girl" sentiment was perfect for this card, since it looks like my little sheep is getting the heck out of Dodge as she jumps over the fence. I prepped a piece of poppy cardstock with my powder tool, and I've inked up the sentiment on my mini MISTI using some Sweet Tooth pigment ink. And I'll heat emboss the sentiment off camera with white embossing powder. I'll die cut the sentiment using the Stitch Sentiment Strips Die-namics off camera, and then I'll layer it on top of a strip of gray and white striped pattern paper that I die cut using the Slanted Sentiment Strips Die-namics. After adding some foam squares, I'll adhere it to the card base. Since the striped pattern paper is too long, I'll use my scissors to snip off the excess. I'll adhere some of my favorite sparkling clear sequins to the card base using some multi-medium matte, a jewel picker, and my handy-dandy tweezers. As a final detail, I'm stamping the grass clump onto the hills using some Gumdrop green dye ink. And we're done. This would be perfect for congratulations on a new job or promotion, or how about for graduation? Whatever the occasion, the dimension added by the paper toll technique makes this card a winner in my book. And that'll do it for my January release class project. Thanks so much for watching my video today. I hope you enjoyed it and that you'll give this paper toll technique a try. Be sure and check out the other January release class videos for more great content, and have a fantastic day.